scenes which have actually attracted condemnation across the world today is the snatching of the ballot materials in Parliament. We'll hear what the security analysts have to say. But before that, let's get on Zoom. I have political science lecturer at the University of Ghana, Professor Ransford Gyampo, joining me. Professor Gyampo, thank you for your time and Happy New Year to you. Did you expect, or did what happened last night in Parliament fall within your expectation for the night prior? Hi, Professor Gyampo. I think you're speaking, but you're muted. If
Hello.
you do, right, I do hear you now. So my question was whether or not what happened in Parliament last night did sit within the expectations you had for the night.
Well, what happened last night is, can be situated in the theory of legislative violence. And when we talk about legislative violence, essentially you are talking about violent clash between members of parliament, oftentimes triggered by a hung parliament, when there are divisive issues to be discussed, and then also when there is what we refer to as tight votes. And generally, although the sight of brawling among parliamentarians is oftentimes incongruous with the legislative stately image, it must be noted that members of parliament are also human beings who are often prone to stress and anger. What makes our case a bit, what gives us some hope in our case is that this attitude exhibited by our members, some of the people who did, them are people who were generally members of parliament elect. They were not sworn in members of parliament. And so one will want to hope that as they have now been sworn in, this attitude will not be carried over to characterize their
but what
activities.
What difference does it make whether or not you are being sworn in and you put up an clearly unacceptable behavior? What difference does it make?
Well, so I was trying to find out whether the attitude of the man who snatched the ballot papers and ran away with them could be brought before the Privileges Committee, for instance, when Parliament they resumed their real work. And somebody drew my attention that, look, he did it at the time when he was not a sworn-in member of Parliament. And so the point is, all legislative violence and some of these acts of rancor, acrimony, and tension that characterized parliamentary proceedings, happens all over the world in developing democracies and even in developed democracies. So all that you need to do is to crowd members of parliament together, fill them with fire of partisan ardor, perplex them with doubt as to the personal gain or loss that may follow their votes on any question at hand, and instill in them with some envy of and ill will towards their fellows, and you would naturally have abundant cause for a row. And so all that one needs is an excuse. Once they have an excuse to do whatever they want to do, they would be doing some of these things. But the point is, we have come a long way as a developing democracy. We've not been doing some of these things. But the point must also be emphasized that this is the first time we are having a hung parliament. And anytime you have a hung parliament and there are tight votes and no political party has the numerical strength to constitute enough majority, people would always want to assert themselves, particularly when they believe that the other side is trying to do something untoward to outsmart them. They would meet you, quote and unquote, and to use popular Ghanaian parlance, boot for boot. And when it becomes clearly competitive and the tensions rise, you would expect some of these things. And so it is not uncommon. It happens all over the world. But I want to hope and believe that given our general posture as a peace-loving people, now that these MPs have been sworn in as honorable members, going forward, I want to believe that they would approach some of these issues that brings tension among them with some trepidation and ensure that these things do not characterize their proceedings and deliberations.
Now, if you have followed, some of the things that have happened in other parliaments, even in the parliaments of developed world, we have seen some of these rather unfamiliar, chaotic scenes in some of these parliaments. Do you get the sense that there is a sort of ripple effect on what's happening, or what, let's say, members of parliament in our part of the world feel they can do, because there tend to be a sense of total disregard for public perception of their behavior?
I don't think there is any. I don't think it's a ripple effect. What we are seeing is simple. Is the fact that we haven't had this kind of parliament before. We haven't had this kind of parliament that has majority, or that, they could not even today talk about majority and minority.
Right.
We haven't had this kind of parliament that has 137, and then one independent person. We haven't had it before. And so I'm saying these are some of the features that typifies such, kind of parliament all over the world. And so they are just reflecting what happens when you have a parliament where no political party has enough numbers to command majority of votes. But like I said, I want to hope and believe that you would agree with me that towards the end of all these things, they were calm and all that. So,
which is what I was going to come to, because it appears that the nature of the conversation at the end had everything to do with the election of the speaker. It looks as if the speaker, now coming from the side of the opposition, calmed the tensions there, would you say?
Yeah, because like I said, you are dealing with, do you even have opposition? Well, okay, you have a ruling government.
Of course.
You are dealing with an opposition that felt that it also had the numerical strength and all that. So they were pushing their agenda, and they didn't want anybody to outsmart them. They didn't want their efforts to be thwarted and all that. And so once they got what they wanted, and also once the party that has formed the government also started realizing that, look, we do not even have the kind of strength that we used to have in time past. They became calm, and once they also became calm, then generally you were expecting that issues will be settled in a manner that will bring some conciliation and then some peace. And so generally, this is what happened, and I want to hope and believe, as I indicated earlier, that going forward, this shouldn't be the conduct and behavior of our members of parliament. Yes, legislative violence happens all over the world. It will happen when issues are when there is a hung parliament, and when there are divisive issues, and when political parties have more or less equal numerical strength. It will happen. But the point is, as a developing nation, we have shown over in the West African sub-region, and we've shown the world that we are interested in climbing higher the ladder of democratic progression. And so my caution, or my word of advice, is that let our members of parliament copy best practices, and not to allow the fact that, yes, we have a hung parliament to usher them into a regime where every deliberation or parliamentary proceedings may be characterized by rancor, acrimony, and tension.
Well, getting them to choose that path, is there a way you think that you reckon that Ghanaians can actually force the sides to work together without the scenes that?
No, there's a way for them to work together. First of all, they had a clerk of parliament who was clearly very weak and unprepared for the job. Okay, is
it fair to describe him as such, looking at what we had
we've witnessed this before. This is not the first time we are having to elect our Speaker of Parliament, and the proceedings have been managed by a clerk of parliament. We saw the days of Ken Techi and co. I think, to my mind, he was quite weak and seemed unprepared for the task. Otherwise, he should have anticipated some of these things and quickly summoned a meeting among the leaders of the House to brainstorm and find resolutions or solutions to the issues before they de-escalated. And so, yes, that happened. But now you have a speaker of parliament who has the experience, persona, and pedigree in the person of Alban. He's been there for 28 years, and he's been a second deputy speaker of parliament for some time. I want to believe that, given the experience that he has, he would quickly be able to meet the leaders of the House behind the scenes when some of these issues, there are indications or signs that some of these issues may happen. When you're able to meet and have a certain respect, show a certain courtesy and respect to the leadership, issues would not de-escalate. And you would agree with me that when they met and then they decided on who should become the second deputy speaker and first deputy speaker, and they brought it to the plenary, and you didn't have much objection and opposition and all that. And so going forward, they should be well aware that no political party has the numerical strength to bulldoze its way through. If you try to do that, you'll be met with stiff opposition, and some of these things will happen. And so they should be politically wise and proactive in ensuring that they resort to maneuvers behind the scenes that would preempt or prevent the occurrence of some of these acts of brawl and conflict on the floor of parliament. You work at it behind the scenes before you come to plenary. And if you do that, I want to believe our parliamentary practice will be a shining example for the rest of the Africa region.
I have two quick questions before we wrap up. Based on the back of what you have just said, would you describe what happened prior to the leadership now meeting to get things to flow naturally as a pure leadership failure? Perhaps if they had had that meeting earlier.
Well, pure leadership failure, I mean, it's apt. And like I said, the clerk was quite weak and seemed unprepared for the task.
No, I'm talking about the sides.
So next time,
the majority and the minority leader in the 7th Parliament at the time of these
well, somebody should have summoned them to a meeting. Normally, they are combatants, and you needed a referee, a third party, to bring them, a referee to stand in the middle, to bring them together to settle the issues, out of the public view. And this wouldn't have led to what we all witnessed, which to my mind is very unacceptable.
Right. And my final question would be the presence of the military. At the end of the day, they had to bring in the military. Of course, the NDC surrounded them, chanted songs of revolution. Finally, they got out. To what extent do you think that even the mere optics could jeopardize our democratic credentials?
The one who sent or commanded the military to be there was politically childish and infantile. He shouldn't have done that. You didn't need the military to be there to... what did they go there to do? When they went there, they went to actually aggravate the situation. And so the practice of use, abuse, and deployment of soldiers to attempt to deal with matters that pure police and civilians can handle is unacceptable, is politically infantile, and must be condemned. Soldiers themselves are not happy when they are deployed to do this. They are trained to defend the territorial integrity of the nation, and they are not people who are trained to be handling or dealing with brawls that could be ironed out by consensus on the floor of parliament. It's politically infantile for anybody to think about deploying soldiers to go and tell members of parliament what to do. It doesn't happen. And you saw what was happening in America, regardless of the demonstration and how annoying the demonstrators were. It was the police that was trying to push them away and all that. They could have also brought in soldiers and all that.
They did bring in the National Guard, by the way. We quickly want to deploy and abuse the military in everything that we do. It is
It is politically infantile.
Leave us with your thoughts on Alban Bagbin, what he brings to this rather interesting set of parliamentarians that we have.
Well, first of all, I was quite surprised that the MPP decided to nominate Professor Michael Quay, my mentor, my teacher, that I thought was quite tired and had to be rested. And I was thinking they would have nominated a new face, somebody who enjoyed or enjoys the support of even the mind or even the NDC. So in my earlier write-up, I put it out there that the best person for them should have been Freddie Blake, but they didn't listen. They went again with Professor Michael Quay. I knew it was going to be difficult. And yes, clearly, this is the result. You have Alban Bagbin. Like I said, he's an experienced legislator. And I expect that we wouldn't see him as a typical divisive Speaker of Parliament. He is not your typical NDC person who will be there to do only the bidding of the NDC. Events in previous times show that yes, he's sat as a second deputy Speaker of Parliament, and if you look at even his contribution in the latter part, as an MP, to the issues of Parliament, he looked at issues dispassionately and all that. So my view is that he is going to be like Peter Alagite, who was a former MPP chairman, but when he became Speaker, he asserted the independence of his office and looked at things dispassionately, sometimes to the annoyance of even the party that selected him to be a speaker. But this is a kind of the type of speaker we want. Somebody who understands the issues and who will be fair, firm, and nobody can rough ride him, and nobody can disrespect him. So I expect, I don't think that, all is lost for the MPP. I believe government business can still be carried out, and I do not expect Alban Bagbin to do anything that will make him overly partisan in sabotaging government agenda. I want to believe that he would work with all sides, and once you have enough consultations and there's mutual respect, I believe parliamentary proceedings will go on and government business will not suffer.
And speaking of which, President Akufo-Addo indicated that he's willing to wholeheartedly, as he puts it, work with him. Your thoughts on the president's speech as well?
No, it's an excellent speech, just that the president has no choice. I mean, this is not the time for you to, for any president to want to throw his weight about. You have no choice than to work with them. And so for me, he stated the obvious.
All right. Prof. Gyampo, thank you very much for your time. Like I said earlier, I think you didn't hear me. Happy New Year to you. Professor Gyampo there, he's a lecturer at the University of Ghana Political Science Department. So he's been sharing his thoughts, very detailed thoughts on what happened in Parliament, what it says of us, the way forward. And of course, like you heard him say, President Akufo-Addo, he says, has no choice but to work with what he has in Parliament. Watching the polls with me, give T and up here.